So it's definitely a market that is not developed enough yet. So the businesses that are accessible are in a good place still because they are few. So they need to understand that it's really a gold mine for us to know that they exist. Yeah, I think the other financial part of the positive side of accessibility is it's often a lot cheaper than people think.
Welcome to Sustainable Futures with Daniela Bas, where innovation meets impact. Join me every first and the third Saturday at 10 a.m. Central European Time for engaging conversations with visionaries reshaping industries like fashion, tech, tourism, sports, and more through social fairness and sustainability. As a global leader and change maker, I share fresh insights and actionable ideas to inspire meaningful change and drive results. Tune in, subscribe, and help shape a brighter, sustainable future. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, whichever part of the world you are. Today, my very special guest is Madame Isabelle Ducharme from Quebec, Montreal in Canada, who is a top expert in the sector of tourism. Bonjour Isabelle, ça va?
Bonjour, ça va très bien, très contente d'être avec toi.
Moi aussi. Alors, notre relation actuelle s'inscrit dans un profond engagement à rendre le monde plus accessible, n'est-ce pas? Et nos chemins se sont croisés à travers d'importantes initiatives mondiales, notamment le premier somme mondial Destination pour tous à Montréal. Je crois qu'il était octobre 2014.
2014.
Voilà. Que j'ai eu l'honneur d'inaugurer alors que je dirigeais les questions de développement social et de durabilité des Nations Unies à l'invitation de Keroul et à la demande de l'ancien secrétaire général des Nations Unies, M. Ban Ki-moon, de le représenter. Je suis vraiment heureux de t'avoir comme invité. Alors, si ça va pour toi, je vais passer à parler en anglais.
Bien sûr.
Merci. So, Isabelle, I have a very jolly question for you you're not aware of. And I'm telling to our audience, let's find out more about Isabelle before revealing more about what she does and who she is. Now, Isabelle, the upcoming Third World Summit on Accessible Tourism in Turin in 2025, this year in Italy, I believe is set to be a milestone event. And correct me, but I think you are a member of the steering committee. Am I right?
Of course, yes, because Keroul was at the origin of the summits, right? So there was the first one in Montreal, the second one in Brussels, and then in Belgium. And we are making sure that it goes on. So we will always be part of the steering committee. And we are worked really hard with Belgium to find the next place where the summit would be held. And we're very, very enthusiastic about the upcoming event in Italy because we see that the team that is putting it together is very well organized, very, very happy to be holding it and getting the support as well from a lot of people. And we've been asked for since the one in 2018. When is this next one? We need the next one. So, yes, we're very happy to have it happen.
What key commitments or breakthroughs do you hope to see emerge from this summit? And how can it drive real change in global inclusive tourism policies?
The idea of the summit really came because we were going to many events where we saw that we were all talking about the same thing, but in the end we all went our separate ways and nothing was really moving. So the idea was to have a summit where People come and present strong business case of what works in their area and how it can be applied in other areas. But it was also the declaration that people had to sign to engage in making sure that they work on making tourism more accessible. I think it was 20, I want to say 25 different lines of engagement for people to. So there were government, there were businesses, there were individuals that signed that declaration saying, I'm engaging in making sure that tourism becomes more accessible. And it was in all aspects. So from lodging to transportation to activities. And we saw when we held the second one in Belgium already that things lessons were learned and applied from the first event, and so we're really looking forward to see how much it has evolved since 2018. Unfortunately, there was supposed to be one in 2022, but because of all the events we all know, it was pushed back. But at least now we have one this year.
So, dear friends, have you heard from Madame Isabelle Ducharme, her passion with an unshakable drive and a passion for accessibility? Isabelle has transformed the tourism landscape for persons with reduced mobility, temporary or permanent, persons with disabilities. She's a pioneer in shaping policies that make travel inclusive for all. And Isabel, after a car accident, I think in 1988, you were left with a spinal cord injury. And
Yes.
Isabel turned the challenge into advocacy, earning degrees in communication and tourism management. Nowadays, Isabel is a chairperson, the chairperson of Keroul. And you might maybe tell us a tiny bit more about Keroul, and you have developed an expertise in auditing, training, and promoting accessible tourism for persons with disabilities in Quebec. Madame Ducharme drives a systemic change through her expertise in governance, policy, and advocacies, as I said, working with industry leaders like Via Rail, Air Canada, just to mention a few. And you are a sought after speaker and advisor and transform accessibility from an afterthought into a business advantage. I really admire it. So let's explore your vision, Isabel, for an inclusive world through tourism. We're talking about this huge industry. My first question is, from your leadership experience with Keroul, Via Rail, and Air Canada, what's the most effective policy change you have seen that has made a real impact on inclusive tourism?
Well, I know that if I speak for Canada, we finally got a Canadian accessibility law that was voted in 2019. And that made a big change in all aspects of accessibility, but especially in transportation. Now we have stronger commitment that has to be made from any airline, airport, train company, even ferries from one province to another. So that definitely has an impact because now they get sanctions if they don't respond. What I really appreciate about this new regulation is that it touches all aspects. It's accessibility in general with the built environment, but it's also it involves the employment of people with disabilities. So because I do remember the first time I went to the botanical garden here in Montreal, and it was somebody that was in a wheelchair that scanned my ticket to get in. And then that sort of told me, okay, they really understand that accessibility is more than just the built environment or making sure you have the right size of the door to go in, or you have the people that are trained the right way, but also employing people with disabilities is like an all around understanding. It's a better understanding than just going with the basic regulation. It's going above.
Yes, accessibility is the freedom to make choices. Choose to work, choose to have fun, choose to be lazy, but then I wouldn't recommend that. And the possibility and the potential to go to places and also, how can I say, be able to enjoy what the places offer. Accessibility is not enough. It has also to be usable wherever we go, whatever we find in the places we go. So, what can other industries learn from it, Isabel?
Here in the province of Quebec, we are the only organization that is really working on the accessibility of tourism and culture for people with disabilities. No other provinces has a specific organization working on that. We work on the audits, we work on the training, and on promoting the accessibility. So we touch all aspects from helping the businesses become more accessible, but also making sure that the people that want to use the services that are accessible know that they exist. So we are an all around business, or we're a nonprofit organization, but you can find all aspects of what you need to know about accessibility in our organization. But the support that we get from the Ministry of Tourism here in the province is key to making sure that we can reach out to businesses. We can reach out to specific, we have what we call the regional tourism organization. Each region has a representative, a director. With the support of the Minister of Tourism, we get that credibility when we want to reach out to representatives. So then it's easier to go to a hotel or to go to any type of business, whether it be a park, whether it be a zoo, a theater venue. Then you get more credibility because you get the support of the Minister of Tourism, and also because we've been doing this since 1979. So that's also helps the credibility.
You know, Isabel, when I was in my early 30s, I went to Montreal, Quebec. There was a huge conference on tourism, and that's where I met for the first time a representative of Keroul, because in those years I was representing Italy to the European Commission about tourism and independent living. So they sent me to Canada, and I found a stand and I read Keroul. So I wanted to ask a few questions, and that's when, for the very first time in my life, I heard the expression a person with temporary or permanent reduced mobility. And I loved it. And since then, I adopted it. So thank you to the organization now you're sharing. Isabel, we spoke about airlines. So, how to improve the experience of flying to tourists with a temporary or permanent reduced mobility? What could airports and airlines, based on your experience, do?
Through lived experience and through what I hear from other people that travel, and anybody that needs help when they get to an airport and wants to take a flight. The one thing that is very helpful is when you can have that one person from the airport that will help you from the time you come in to the time that your eyes sitting in the aircraft, and same thing when you come back. So having that service that is like, you don't have to go from one person to another and explain what you need again and the way that you need it, and everything. So that's definitely one thing that has been done. I think I just saw it in a few European countries, but I haven't seen it done in North America. The other thing is, obviously, for those that are getting around in wheelchairs, the day that we will be able to stay in our wheelchairs when we go and take a flight would be definitely an amazing moment. But just understanding how it is important to prepare for that person's needs is so whether it be taking a bit more time because somebody is a slow walker or somebody is blind and needs a bit more explanation about the environment, explaining, once you get into the aircraft where the washrooms are, what's going on if there's an emergency. And for people that have a mobility impairment, especially somebody like me that doesn't have the use of the forelimbs, I need a lot more help getting in and out of the seat. Understanding that there's a human being behind that, and understanding we hear so many horror stories about people's wheelchairs being broken. We hear about luggages and it's not fun. We hear about, yeah, we hear about luggages and it's true that it's not fun, but if you don't have your toothbrush or your favorite t-shirt for a couple of days, I think you can survive. But if they broke your wheelchair or if they broke your crutches or if you're, then it's a completely different story, because I'm sure your wheelchair is just like mine, adapted to my needs, to my body, so you can't just replace it by any other wheelchair. Definitely understanding that there's a strong human factor, and there's every step of that journey is important and has to be taken seriously. Well, I think that's one thing that we always say. Like, even with, if I compare it to the medical system, we always say we wish any doctor would have been a patient at one time, because then they would understand what it is, what it means to be waiting for hours in a waiting room, or going into the office and not being able to ask questions and things like that. I think it's the same thing for accessibility. Until you lived it, it seems you don't completely understand it. So I think that definitely if somebody in power was to all of a sudden have to get around, and as you said, whatever the case may be, whether it be a wheelchair or crutches, or I think there would be a sudden change of perception of first what accessibility means. And I don't want to say a luxury or a charity. Actually, when we talk about accessibility, often we feel like we're begging for something that in the end should just exist. So we have to, I think, by having somebody that is in a place of power be suddenly in a with a disability or with a need of accessibility, they would look at it more as a way of being open to more people, and it would make things move faster, and it wouldn't be seen as just a cost, but it would be seen as an investment into making sure that you can do things like everybody else does to a service or to an activity. André Leclerc, the founder of Keroul, that retired after 40 years of service, used to say that nobody's life is full if you don't have access to leisure, if you don't have access to tourism, if that's what you like to do. And I believe that is so true. I mean, who wants to just be working or going to school, or you don't want to do obligations all the time. You need that free time to just enjoy life a little bit. And often it's those places that are less accessible, sometimes because they were built such a long time ago, sometimes because it's the design, it's so fancy, but it didn't take into account the accessibility part of it. So I think having a person all of a sudden that is a CEO or somebody that has power decision, that would definitely make things move faster.
And it's also another question here, accessibility in terms of the costs. Sometimes, at least nowadays, in many parts of the world, depending on the kind of reduced mobility one has, if it is as kind of severe, services and products often, not always, are found in very exclusive, expensive places. And not necessarily everyone has all the amount of money to be able to travel and enjoy the places and visit around and pay for extremely expensive hotels, because often, not always, those are the hotels that provide many services and facilities, not necessarily for visually impaired people or people with sensory disabilities. I haven't found those many. Now, governments and businesses often talk about accessibility. Change is happening, yet it remains slow. What's one uncomfortable truth about inclusive tourism that industry leaders don't want to hear from your experience, Isabel?
I'm thinking more of what they don't hear.
Okay.
They don't realize how much of a market it is. They don't realize that, well, first of all, it can happen to anybody at any time, permanent or temporary. So it could even happen to them or somebody close to them. And we all talk about the aging population, and they have the money to, and they say, oh, yeah, it's true. But then they go back to their business and they just forget about that part. So I think it's really, people need to take into account that it's really happening because we see it. I used to take a flight and not see anybody else that needed assistance. Now there's a lot more people needing assistance for different reasons. There's a lot more people traveling that would have never dared travel before. Um, the I need a Hoyer lift to get in and out of bed, so that needs to slide under the bed. So a lot of people don't travel because they don't even know that they can rent one for the hotel. And the last time I traveled was the first time somebody at the airport came up to me and said, listen, I'm using a Hoyer lift, and I look at you and I imagine you need one too. So how did you manage in your hotel and things like that? Like that would have never happened before. So those are signs that there is more and more people traveling. Yeah. And there's, I think, to come back to your question about what they don't hear or what they don't, why they don't adapt, I think it's also the uncomfortable question, or they're wondering still today, how do I talk to a person that is in a wheelchair? How do I talk to a person that is blind? How do I deal? How do I serve that person? In our trainings, of course, we always say, just treat them like you would any other person, any other client. Just, the smile, the how are you and how can I help you?
Yes.
is all you need. And then after that, so many people, we've done studies, and we've seen studies done around the world where a lot of people say maybe the place wasn't fully accessible, but the people were so friendly that it made up for it. So that's another part that a lot of business don't understand. And then I think finally, because then I imagine you have other questions, but I think the other thing that businesses have to realize is that if you are accessible, or if you weren't and you transformed your business and it is now accessible, you need to promote it. I have seen, unfortunately, businesses that spent a lot of money on becoming accessible, but then didn't have any money for the promotion. So if you don't tell people that you changed your business to make it accessible, I'm not going to go back to see you because I don't know that you became accessible. So that's the other thing. If you are accessible, you should don't hide it, or don't just assume that people will know it, because we also see in studies that people with disabilities have such a hard time finding places that are accessible and suiting their needs, especially in hotels and different activities, that they will go back to that place that responded to their needs, and they will spread the news. Like, I have so many people calling me when they want to travel, or even when they want to do activities in Montreal. You know, I know when you're get around in a motorized wheelchair, so I know that if you can go there, I can go there. So, what are your top five restaurants? What is your favorite place to go see a show and things like that? So, or what is your favorite destination in the world? And so, really, is key is to be open minded, to become accessible, and to put it forward. Like, if you have a website, put it on the first page. There should be a tab on your first page where people can click and know all about the accessibility of your venue, whatever the type may be.
It's clear that tourism is a $1 trillion industry, and yet, although there are improvements, accessibility is seen as a cost, not as a profit driver. Also, because then those who are making their places accessible do not publicize them well enough. So, what's Keroul's strongest economic argument to make CEOs realize inclusive travel is a smart investment, Isabel?
There's the aging population, but there's more and more people surviving to accidents, to illnesses, but that leave them with some sort of limitations, and they still want to travel. So the market is there. Also, people don't think about the fact that in the world that we live today, most people are very individualized. They decide they want to go somewhere, they go on their own, and they're fine. In the case of people with disabilities, most of the time travel with a friend, with a caregiver. We travel with the family. It's like double, triple the money that you would get from another client. And we've seen it happen with different businesses that mentioned once they became accessible, they saw that there was a growth in an income, and partly because, yes, you don't have just that person that checks in for that one room for with one person. So it's definitely a market that is not developed enough yet. So the businesses that are accessible are in a good place still, because they are few. They need to understand that it's a it's really a gold mine for us to know that they exist. The other financial part of the positive side of accessibility is it's often a lot cheaper than people think. People see it as, oh, I'm going to have to invest too much and I don't want to do that. And I want to have return on my investment and things like that. But often, you just need to put grab bars in your bathroom and you're already more accessible than you were. And grab bars are not that expensive. And it's also a one time investment. So that's another thing that people have to understand, that you become accessible and then you can greet more people. And I know some of my friends and family, they will not go to a place that they see is not accessible. They don't need the accessibility, but because they see it wouldn't be accessible for somebody like me, they won't go in, even if they can. So that's another aspect to think about, is the financial side is not just for the person with the disability. It touches sometimes even further. And so there's many reasons to become accessible.
The more people become aware, the more the culture, the attitude that changes, and the more everyone will reject places that are not for all because they feel it's a discrimination, right? And
Exactly.
then on the other hand, you said gold mine, but those CEOs who open their eyes do realize that there is so much potential for their business to grow because this huge niche of potential travelers hasn't been attracted to go to places that are accessible. So let's move now to the second part of this conversation and let's talk about the past. Once upon a time, accessibility in tourism was barely an afterthought. So, what was the defining moment that made you say, this needs to change and I want to be part of the solution?
Definitely my accident, because I have to admit that before that, I had nobody around me that was in a wheelchair or with any special needs of adaptation. I even remember just a quick anecdote that I used to go dancing every weekend, and there in the last few months before my accident, I saw that same guy that would come, and he was in a wheelchair. And I was looking at him with his friends, and he looked like such a friendly guy. And I wanted to go and talk to him, but I didn't want him to think that I was coming out of pity or and so I didn't dare go and talk to him as I would with any other guy. And now looking back, I realized that he probably would have been very happy that I went and said hi. But at the time, I had no contact with anybody with any type of disability. So then I had my accident, and during my the rehabilitation period, one of the things I needed to know was that I could still travel. Somebody told me about Keroul, and they don't. But that we're talking about 1988, so they were in business for about 9 years, and that's when I discovered that my dream was possible, to still be traveling, to still be doing activities. And out of all the questions that you ask yourself when you have an accident, like my car accident, is, of course, why did it happen to me and everything? But part of it for me was looking at what I could still do, and what I had before and I still had after my accident was my ability to communicate. And for me, that was probably the key to getting out of readaptation in a positive way, is deciding to use my voice to make things change, because I was still in rehab when I did my first travel, and I went to a sunny destination, and I had asked all the right questions before I left, except that when I got there, the hotel was accessible, but it was an old hotel, and the bathroom doors were too small for me to go in. So that key moment I did ask the right questions, the transportation, the hotel, and everything. But I didn't know I had to go into such details as the doorway of a hotel and the accessibility of the pool. Like to me, it was automatic, right? It's a hotel that's accessible. Everything's going to be fine. So when I realized that there needed to be more questions and there needed to be more training. So that's really what got me involved in tourism.
So that was your big aha. Now, what is the biggest misconception about accessible and inclusive tourism today, in your view and in the view of Keroul? And how do we change that narrative, Isabel?
I think not understanding that it's for all. And as you mentioned earlier, the temporary part is so important. Yes, it's for everybody like you and me that is permanent, but it's also useful for so many people that have, crutches for a while because they broke a leg or, any type of reason that it might be so good to have a ramp rather than steps and have that bigger bathroom to be able to go in with your kid and things like that.
Now, let's dream. And if you were 20 years old in 2071, what kind of tourism industry would you want to experience? And what do we need to do today to make that vision a reality, Isabel?
Well, I think it'd be nice if by that time you don't need to ask before you try, before you plan a trip, before you decide to go see a movie, go to a theater, or want to experience an activity, not have to ask, is it accessible? That automatically it is. To have that world where it's just automatically thought as inclusive for all population. And I think to do that, I think we need to have stronger laws, stronger application of those laws, because in many cases, there are regulations, there are building codes, but there's not enough enforcement. Sometimes the design is so amazing, beautiful, but inaccessible. I
Having
hope.
someone like you who is a good communicator, raising awareness with communication in a positive way, I think will help a lot. Because if we change the cultural infrastructure, then all the other infrastructures, be that they are architectural, technological, or else, will change automatically, right?
I think it's really on how you approach it rather than complaining about something that is not accessible. It's more sharing how you could make it accessible.
Exactly. Collaborate together and cooperate. Last question, closing question, Isabel. What's the one legacy you hope in your role as chair of Keroul to live in the world of inclusive leadership in the tourism industry? Now I'm talking to the leader.
I hope my passion is something that is transferred to others. I don't look at problems, I look at solutions. So I hope that stays with both the organization, but with anybody I had contact with. We do go to talk to students of all ages, whether it be, uh, high school, college, university, and to people that are already working in the industry. And I hope that that's the positive way of looking at things and the importance of working together, not working in silos, not working in our each in our corners thinking we know what's best, but really sharing and building on each other's strengths.
So you're talking about resilience, you're talking about leading by example, and you're talking about empathy and problem solving. And all of these are skills of a good, excellent leader, as you are, Isabel. Thank you so much for this interview.
Thank you, Daniela, for inviting me. It was really a pleasure.
J'espère à la prochaine alors. Au revoir.
Au revoir.
As I wrap up this episode, my heartfelt gratitude to today's guest and to all of you. Join me for the next episode as we delve deeper with special guests, uncovering thought-provoking insights and actionable steps, paving the way for a brighter, inclusive, sustainable tomorrow. Thanks also to Damian Morton, music, and Maria Cortez Gagliano, social media. Don't miss out next episode on shaping the future we aspire to. Ciao, ciao!